This is Coda Radio, episode 114 for August 11th, 2014. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this year's show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our excellent host on the East Coast, Mr. Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So, I feel like I just talked to you recently.
I know, we've gotten a new closeness together, Chris, that...
I feel like we've spent more time together than we normally have. I wonder why I have that odd feeling. I wonder what that is about. I think maybe some people didn't know we did a sneaky episode last week. So if you are counting carefully, you will notice this is 114. This is 114, my friends, because 113 was a bonus episode we recorded last week. We had 2 episodes. I kind of feel kind of proud of that.
I think it's great, and I think that... your recent switch to full-time OS 10 is really...
What? No, that's somebody else. That's one of our emailers.
No, I think it's you. Let's see. Not Chris last.
We'll see about
suspicious.
that. Because we had a little short gap, we're going to answer kind of a question we've gotten in different iterations over the years on this show that we've given a couple of different responses to. And so this week we thought, we will move this into sort of our hoopla section to sort of give the Coda Radio definitive answer on this topic, so when people are searching the catalog, they'll find this. We were planning to do TypeScript, but we kind of didn't really think ahead with the short time window between last week's episode, which was on Thursday, and then, of course, you have Friday, and then boom, here we are right back on Coda Radio. But it actually works out pretty well because this is based on the emails we've been getting, and this is something we kind of need to address again. And something also we can update with some new insights. We've also just got a lot of great feedback, too, to jump into, Mr. Dominic. So why don't we start with our first email from Sudair, I think I'm going to say how you say his name. He wants to know if a developer's time is truly worth maintaining his own infrastructure to support his product. So here's the long version of his question. He says, I'm looking for an automatic bug reporting solution for my Android applications. There are some popular solutions like Crashalytics and Instabug. One annoyance with commercial solutions is that they want you to do things in a certain way. They add their own little enhancements in between which you might not need. I found another solution, Arca, A-C-R-A, which is a free and fully open source software and community, has a great community, with a web app and some good backends. Pretty much all languages are supported. So he wants to know, what's your view on hosting your own Git server bug reporting solution, etc., for your own products? He's wondering if you end up spending too much time, because maybe you don't have a team, too. This is maybe a bigger consideration. He says he also loves the show, although sometimes he feels like he's not getting enough. Well, then, sir, go make sure you get Lucky 113. So, Mr. Dominic, you've got a team now, so it's one thing to host your own systems in-house. But if you were to be, if you were just working by yourself, do you worry about crossing that line and saying, okay, well, now I'm spending too much time on my infrastructure, not enough time on my code?
Yeah, I mean, when I was solo act, it was all GitHub, right, and Bitbucket.
So he's trying to figure out how to identify that. How do you figure out what it is worth your time?
Well, I think if you're working alone and you're doing some sort of contracting or work for hire, your bookkeeping, your sales, your actual product development, your marketing yourself. I mean, there's a lot, and probably maintaining your source control servers is not something you probably want to be doing. Now, when you get to the point where someone else is maybe doing sales, someone else is maybe doing a little bit of marketing, right?
Right.
You can start to look at, the economics start to be a little different, right?
Well, it's funny. Early on, there's actually, in my opinion, more incentive to go with the hosted solutions because a lot of times those are easier to share with new team members. I'm thinking Basecamps, right. Google Apps, GitHub. It's almost easier when you don't maintain it yourself if it's just a couple of people. And then all of a sudden you cross this invisible line where all of a sudden now, it would be way more cost effective if we were self-hosted, or we could do a lot more if we were self-hosted.
Yeah, I mean, having said that though, right, there's a difference between GitHub and Google Apps, certainly.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, Google Apps, you probably don't cross that cost ineffective line until you're talking 3 digits of people. self-hosting, I mean, we're using GitLab on DigitalOcean, and that's working out fine. GitHub was getting a little too expensive. And, I still don't know if GitHub in particular, and this is kind of neither here nor there, is super focused on individuals or companies. They put a lot of emphasis on the individual developer, which is, I don't feel this way, but I could see some people feeling like, well, I don't really want my team advertising themselves, right? Especially if you're in that contracting space. For instance, individual accounts are part of the organization account, right? So if you ever share repos with, let's say, the customer, they would see the individual accounts of your team and therefore see their email addresses, things like that.
Right.
And that you get it. That's where I'm sure you've dealt with this, Chris, when you've had customers who have these crazy non-compete kind of like psychotically paranoid agreements they make you sign.
Yeah, well, or sometimes they're like, what's even more offensive is the boilerplate ones that are just like automatically extremely aggressive.
Right. And, it definitely makes sense, right? That I think as an individual, GitHub makes a lot of sense because in a way your own code becomes your marketing. But I think for a company, GitHub gets a little weird quickly. For a small company, it probably still makes a lot of sense because it does your issue tracking and a lot of your project management for you. But there is some value in hosting that yourself because then, I don't know.
Gosh, I almost feel like we're talking about YouTube. It's so weird. Like,
yeah,
from
it's kind of the same thing.
It's like, there are some advantages, especially when you're small, to host up on YouTube, right? They cover the bandwidth costs, discoverability is much higher. But then as you get larger, there's a lot more advantages to actually driving that traffic to your website and embedding things like HTML5. That way you have more control over the end user experience and et cetera, where it's like GitHub almost feels like the YouTube of code.
Well, I could totally see a scenario, not at fingertip, obviously, but let's say you're at a company and you let someone go. Let's just say someone doesn't show up to work. And you've been using GitHub with your customers. Well, that person might then, go ahead and email your customers GitHub, being like, listen, as an individual, I charge, whatever. I don't know. Is that too paranoid? I know that's... So having worked with other larger consulting development companies, that is how they think. They get very, very paranoid. Like I've actually worked with people where they actually destroy the Git history when they give their customer the code.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's because they don't want any of the,
Well, my most common experience is that the customer doesn't even know to ask, and so then they never provide it.
Well, you have to think about it, especially since a lot of these bigger companies I'm thinking about don't have a lot of US-based development that isn't like smaller companies.
Oh.
So there's certainly a level of paranoia there. I don't know. I mean, I guess GitHub is a bad example, and we're off the rails because GitHub is definitely focusing on that individual developer, right? I think every college student should have a GitHub account for sure.
Right.
You should have some open source up there, and that should be your resume.
Right.
But beyond that, I do think from a corporate perspective, maybe the paranoia crap is not a problem for small companies, but the cost is. I mean, the reality is GitHub gets very expensive very quickly. Having said that, if you have a team, your biggest expense is always going to be your team. So, I don't know, Chris. It's a good question. And
I look at it like this. I think back to his core question for the time. It's like that is such a hard question for somebody externally to answer because it's so based on your workload, how much time you have to set aside, and what your expertise level is, and that would influence how long something will take you. So setting up GitLab is not one of those things that's considerably difficult.
No, it's like 45 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
and the thing that's nice is I look at it like this. GitHub is a great service and a great platform, and it's definitely a place to be, and especially if you're looking for a job or like Mike said, you're in school.
Yeah, I mean, I think if like something happened and I was a solo act again, I would probably just live in GitHub. I think that's pretty fair.
There is one thing that sort of wiggles around in the back of my head, is at the end of the day, the motivations of what my GitLab installation are, quote-unquote motivations, are to enable me to do exactly what I need. The motivations of GitHub are whatever makes GitHub more popular and whatever is good for GitHub.
Well, so the motivation for us to move to GitLab was we have a lot of repos, and we want basically all of them to be private.
Yeah.
So
Money, money,
that was
money.
less so than you'd think, but a lot of it's stupid stuff. Like, for instance, if we have one project, they probably have 2 or 3 repos at least.
Yeah.
So it's not like, well, we have 80 customers. It's, well, they asked us to write the script, and because we're psychotic, we put everything in source control. And since it's not part of the main app, we put it in its own repo, and stuff like that.
Like
started
art
to get,
and things like that, right? Like you have code repos and art repos and
in extreme cases where
shared
there's like a lot of
libraries.
we've occasionally done that, but sometimes it's like they want to run a Unix server, and we had to write a bunch of bash scripts.
Oh, I see.
So we just threw them in a separate repo.
That makes sense, yeah.
Stuff like that you don't even think about in in GitLab.
In GitHub, yeah.
It's, oh, you hit the cap again. Hang on, you have to re-up your credit card because you need to hit the, you upgrade it. They want the stupid CVC off the card.
Yeah.
And if your name doesn't equal Michael Dominic, you don't have that, right? So then someone has to call me, and I have to stop whatever I'm doing and re-enter the grade.
Yeah. Get on the phone and take care of business.
Yeah, it's a little silly.
All right, well, why don't we go to PT Dave, because PT Dave delivered. I was hoping somebody'd write in response to what we had to say about Dart. He says, hey, Chris and Mike. Oh, and those chat room people, too. On the last episode, Mike had mentioned Dart, and it seems like it's not getting used very much anymore. However, Chris is right. Hold on, everybody. You heard it here. That's right. That's right. Breaking news. Chris is right. The Dart community is doing quite well, PT Dave says. We've hit the 1.0 mark a few months back and have been going strong. I've been writing some web apps from server front end in it, from server and all the way up to the front end in Dart, and it makes life so much simpler. To be fair, the biggest problem with Dart is the packages. Polymer has been a huge pain as they advertise it a lot, but they change the requirements often. But this is to be expected. It's still early days. PT Dave. What do you think, Mike? Boom. PT Dave just schooled you on Dart. Right there.
Yeah, so Chris is right. I better go buy that lottery ticket. Jesus.
Wow.
If pigs will be flying when I get out of my house to go back to work, it's going to be a really screwed up day.
I feel maybe like I'm a little sleepy, so I can't tell, but I feel like that might have been sarcasm. Was that sarcasm? No. Okay.
No, Chris, you're always right. I listened to all your shows for years, and of course I'm kidding.
What? Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So Dart is doing things.
There you go. Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
To dart each dart your own. There we go. Hey, our next email is going to make me cry a little bit. And if any Linux Action Show producers are listening, I don't know, you guys. This is going to be a little rough. So you know what we need to do? Before we get into our next email and maybe hear Mike have a cackling evil laugh, why don't we stop and thank our first sponsor and crack open a cold one for DigitalOcean. Head over to DigitalOcean.com and use the promo code CODERAugust. CODERAugust when you go over to DigitalOcean.com. Brand new promo code for the brand new month. DigitalOcean is awesome. I've been using them now ever since Mike told me about them, and Mike's been using them for a long, long time. And now they've really taken off on our audience, too. And let me tell you why. It's simple cloud hosting. DigitalOcean is dedicated to offering the most easy and intuitive way to spin up a cloud server. Users can create a cloud server. Well, I mean, most folks can create a cloud server in 55 seconds. Actually, I've now seen the record set at 21 seconds. It's unbelievable because it's really attributed to their amazing interface. And here's look at the pricing structure. It's so straightforward. Pricing plans start at just $5 a month. You pay $5 and you get 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. So you know exactly what your cost is going to be going into that. And you think about how amazing that is. That's less than the cost of professional Dropbox. And you could make an own cloud instance up on a DigitalOcean droplet or BitTorrent Sync or SyncThing, right? That's just one of the many things you could do. And when you use that promo code CODERAugust, you're going to get the $10 credit. That means 2 months for free to play with anything. You want to try GitLab? Because they've got one-click deployment for GitLab. That's where Mike runs his GitLab, is out of DigitalOcean. And let me tell you something. That interface is so simple and so intuitive. I'm showing it to you on the video version right now. Power users can also replicate it on a much larger scale with DigitalOcean's straightforward API, which you're seeing a lot of great apps come out of. That's been pretty exciting, too. DigitalOcean made an early investment in SSDs, and some of the best and really, and I mean this in 14, 15 years that I've been working in the computer industry, some of the best of breed technology that we have ever seen. It starts with SSD drives. That gets you the high density and great I/O. You really notice a difference. Your applications can really perform, and what you used to need an entire RAID array for can now be slammed into a tiny SSD drive. That's a breakthrough right there. The Linux kernel and its capabilities to do virtualization via KVM are unbelievably great now. They are so far beyond anything we ever conceived of in the early 90s. It is remarkable. And DigitalOcean then said, okay, we've got these great technologies. We've got to make sure we have great hardware in some of the best data centers connected to the best data connections. And then they laid down this interface on top of it. They give you the one-click install, multiple Linux distributions to choose from, an HTML5 console, dual-factor authentication, DNS management, droplet backup, snapshots, transfers, private networking, all of it. DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code CODERAugust when you check out. And a really big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. All right, I hope everybody cracked open that cold one, because this next email, it cuts deep. It cuts so deep. So Texas Linux user writes in, although I think you might need to change that username. He says, hello, Chris and Mike. Just a couple of days ago, my Dell laptop running in Linux, Ubuntu 14.04 to be specific, died on me. When consulting my significant other about getting a new laptop, she pleaded to get something that she could use as well.
Good.
So we landed on a MacBook Pro, since it runs all Apple apps she needs, plus it just got a spec boost. My question is, since I'm a Linux guy, will my transition to a Mac be as shocking as some bloggers put it?
Yeah, it's as seamless as your transition from Coke to heroin, really. It's not that bad.
All my workflow and knowledge of web development, I'm primarily a web dev, is on Linux. I know that there is no real package management system on the Mac, but I don't see that as a major hindrance. I just don't want to have a bad taste for the Mac before I take a bite. Thanks for the great show, and keep on rocking every single week. Texas Linux user makes me so sad.
You know, do you remember Star Wars, the real second one, episode 5?
Yeah, sure, of course.
You know,
The Empire Strikes Back?
Right, thank you. We're chilling on Dagobah. Do you remember the line about the dark side, Chris?
You must become one with the dark side, or which particular line?
Once you start down the dark path. Yes. Yes.
Damn it. All right, well, so a couple of things jump out at me. Now, Texas Linux user, I happen to think that Linux does make a particularly great web development platform. And Elementary OS just released a beta of their next OS. And what's interesting about that is along with it, they released a step-by-step install guide so you can dual boot a MacBook Pro with Elementary OS and Mac OS. So I'm just putting that out there. I'm just, I'm not trying to be judgy. Also, just one more little piece of information for you to just, digest upon. VMware Fusion is not like VMware on anybody else's platform. VMware Fusion,
good.
Yeah, it's something unique on the Mac. It's actually quite good, and it can run Ubuntu 14.04 amazing.
So are you suggesting that by being on Mac, it's actually better?
Well, it's interesting in some ways because it does normalize out some hardware problems that you have on the Mac if you're running Linux. So if you are on the Mac and you need to run Linux, you kind of have a better time under Fusion. But you don't get like Steam games as much. There is some OpenGL acceleration though, like Compiz is working. So what I would say is you could then, interestingly enough, if you're sharing this computer, right, you could have your development environment and all of your tools in this self-contained environment that wouldn't be mixed up with her stuff. And you could just go in there when you're working. You could obviously then take snapshots and backups of it. And then later on, if you got a different computer, you would just move it to that new computer and your work environment would go along right with you. And Fusion is, it just makes a standard VMDK file. There's a few differences between the other VMware products, but you can easily, well not easily, but it is possible to take a VMware Fusion virtual machine and make it run on Workstation or even convert it to work on VirtualBox. So that might be a possibility. I don't know. Mike, you've probably done the most jumping between Linux and Mac for development. I definitely moved between Linux and Mac for some of my work. And I personally, I'm the kind of person that does prefer the Linux workflow. I think, he dismisses the package manager, but for me, a lot of times I will be working on something esoteric and I just need a quick tool. And it's kind of really empowering to just fire off a quick command in a drop-down terminal and immediately have that tool available to me. there's things like that about Linux, and of course things like the fact that every desktop environment has built-in SFTP mounting. So if I'm working on a website, I can just mount the web server directory
sorry,
in my
I
file.
just vomited over myself with the nerd acronyms there.
Wait,
Shit!
God!
God!
You said commercial software.
Okay, all right. So what should he be warned about when making the transition? What do you think?
All right, so package manager, just get Homebrew. It's fine. It's basically apt-get.
Brew?
Not as
Homebrew?
Yeah. Homebrew, yeah, and you're done.
Homebrew. Yeah, yes. In fact, this is one of the tools Rikai has used to pull down some open source tools on one of our production Macs.
Now, a lot of folks don't like that terminal.app is case insensitive, meaning it doesn't give a shit about case. I love that.
What terminal app? Hold on. No, terminal.
It is case insensitive, yeah. Terminal on Mac is case insensitive. It doesn't care.
Way, dude. No way. No
Right,
way.
no. Let's do it. Ready? Okay, so I'm just popping open a terminal window, doing an ls.
Like you're telling me I could CD into the downloads folder even though it's uppercase D and I'll still go in there if I do lowercase d?
Perfect. I have my downloads folder
Holy
right here.
crap.
Done.
Holy
Lowercase d.
crap. That is ridiculous. Why do they do that?
They do it because people like me can't type.
I don't know how I never noticed that. I mean, you see, this is an example. I do not like the command line environment on the Mac that much.
It's the same.
No, this stuff's in different places. It's in weird places.
Okay. Your home directory is different.
No, that's fine. That's.
All right. How about the magic of the open command, which is a little crazy, but.
Well,
right?
yeah. Why do I have to even use the open command? Why can't I just? Yeah.
So you like that downloads folder, don't you, there, Chris?
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and just open the directory.
So,
opened in Finder. But wait, there's more.
Oh, that's nice. You can do that. You can do that in Linux with Nautilus.
Well, yes, that's a simple example. Let's CD into downloads.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Let's do an ls.
Okay.
Lowercase, baby.
Yeah.
Now, what's this?
Okay, what are we looking at here?
What do I got here? Let's look at some stuff here.
I see an Ubuntu 14.04 ISO.
I have a screenshot here, but let's pretend like I don't know what that screenshot is.
Yeah, sure.
It could be a video. It could be an
image. You don't know.
Let's just go open, screen. Oh, typing's hard. Let me just hit tab. Enter. And I actually have to spell open correctly. There's an enter.
Oh,
open.
You know what? I just mounted a DMG image doing that. That's kind of nice.
Oh, I just opened a PNG in preview. Look at that.
Okay, but again, that's all that you just need. See, on Linux, it's just Nautilus to open the files. You would just use the image viewer command to open.
But you'd have to. Yeah, right. So it's one command.
Yeah. All right, fine. That's an interesting point. But see, then again, if you've been a Linux user for a long time, some of that, like the case insensitivity, I rely on case sensitivity. Like I expect case sensitivity when I lay out my file system. Okay. XDG open. There you go. There you go.
So now Zane is just showing off.
Yeah, look at Zane with the knowledge.
You can pipe to your copy and paste thing. That's a little too scary.
Rikai points out iTerm 2 is a much more beardable terminal for OS 10.
But you see, when you get a Mac, you immediately shave.
and get black rim sunglasses.
Yes, and then you drink craft beers that no one else has ever heard of.
And I think maybe most people get flannel, but not everybody.
Well. I mean, Chris, you're there on Fancy Coffee. Did I not hear talk of an AeroPress?
Hey, can I tell you about something else?
Oh, God.
I've made it even fancier. A real quick aside, and then we'll get to our other emails. But Texas Linux user, by the way, let us know how it goes. I'd be curious to know what drives you crazy.
It's gonna go great. Are you kidding?
Here's what I would tell him: use brew and install fish, and use fish as your shell, and get iTerm, and maybe VMware Fusion, and then you'll be fine.
Here's what I tell him: get your Mac, get an iPhone, download Instapaper, Overcast, and Vesper. You'll be feeling right at home.
Wow.
It's spyware.
Okay, so just really quickly on the coffee thing, and then we'll move on, because I know not everybody cares. Have you heard of bulletproof coffee?
No, but that sounds amazing.
So it's a little weird. Okay, get ready for this. You make your coffee as fancy as you can, and then you put in a certain amount of coconut oil and salt-free grass-fed beef butter. into the coffee, and it makes, and then you have to mix it really strong, really well, and it makes it frothy. So the butter is kind of like a creamer because it's unsalted, it's non-sweet. So it's sort of like adding milk creamer a little bit, and then you can get coconut oil MCT extracts where it doesn't really have any coconut oil flavor, and it creates essentially, it makes your coffee into like a protein shake. Anyways, so there's your hipster update.
Disturbing as hell. And by the way,
Yeah.
when is that MacBook Air coming in? Or are you just up to the Pro? Are you trash canning it?
What are you talking about? Well, actually, I did hear that some Red Hat engineers got Fedora working on the trash can Mac Pro. So that could be cool. That'd be an interesting little machine.
I'm sorry. So it's okay if Red Hat does it?
Well, sure. It's okay if anybody does it. Anybody, I'll take anybody that wants to give it a shot. I see. For me, I think the MacBook is actually a pretty good laptop. We have one here at the studio. It's not a super current one, but we have one, and it's really well built. The problem I have with the MacBooks, and I continue to have with the MacBooks, is the price for what you're getting should have an Ethernet port, and I don't care if they have to make it.
I want my legacy ports.
But see, here's the thing. A lot of MacBook Pro users are media production people, and we're moving files that we need to have transferred at line speed. And so, because they're gigs in size, right? Like this episode, when we're done.
Spend $500, get a Thunderbolt drive, and you're done.
Well, I mean, but in a production environment, it's all over the network, right? You got recording machines and editing machines and so on and so forth. It's just disappointing that for that price you don't get an Ethernet port when they could do it. And what you end up having to do is burn out one of your Thunderbolt ports. So then you essentially get one Thunderbolt port, which means if you add a second display, you're done. Sorry. So there's that about it. And then the other thing that really drives me crazy, is that after all of these damn years, and I can't figure out why, Apple has not released any specs on that SMC controller, so we have no thermal management under any other operating system. So when you boot camp that thing, you're frying your MacBook, or if you run Linux, you're frying it.
Okay, so regarding the controller, the question is the answer, right? They do it so you screw up your computer when you do that.
You think?
But your thing about Thunderbolt, you can daisy chain 2 Thunderbolt monitors together. Yeah, so that's bull. Actually, supposedly, I've never tried. You can daisy chain up to 6 devices, including monitors, with no issue to one port.
Huh.
So
I would suppose most Thunderbolt monitors and stuff probably come with like a second Thunderbolt port.
Yeah, so like these Thunderbolt display, I think has like 2 or 3.
Yeah, but that thing's like $1,000 for a display that hasn't been updated in like 4 years.
Just like Coke, Mac is an expensive habit.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, so we've got to codify some of our philosophies about contract work, and that's on the whole range from, you go do a couple of hours on your own for somebody, or it's your full-time gig. So before we go there, I want to thank our next sponsor, and then that'll be our transition to our next topic, Linux Academy. In fact, go to linuxacademy.com/coders. That's going to get you a nice discount. They'll take 20% off your monthly subscription. linuxacademy.com/coders. So, what is Linux Academy? Well, let's be real. It is your opportunity to improve yourself. There's very few things in our life that we actually have legitimate control over. We'll fool ourselves into thinking that we are masters of our destiny. But the reality is there's not really a lot we actually have control over. However, intellectually bettering ourselves in a field that can make us more employable, or charge more for contracts so we can land a different gig, or check a box on that review, or just be intellectually satisfying to yourself, that is something you can go do. linuxacademy.com/coders. They have step-by-step video courses, downloadable comprehensive study guides. And when you go somewhere in the course material where you need to do something on a production server, their courseware spins up a virtual server for you on the back end. You can run 7 of any available plus Linux distributions that they have. They'll automatically adjust the courseware to match that distribution. So this is great if you're a Fedora guy and you need to check out something in the Debian world, or vice versa. And they've got new courseware on OpenStack with over 14 hours of video content for that. They've got live streams. You can go watch the playbacks or participate live and ask questions directly to the educators. AWS Certified SysOps Administrators Prep course has also really come together. It's looking great. They've got a bunch of other AWS courses as well. And this is a great example. They have a bunch of other scenario-based training. But the one that I feel like really shows you what's so great about Linux Academy is some of their scenario-based training for AWS services. Because when you go actually do that, you're on. right? That can be an expensive thing that you can go wrong for you, can go wrong for your client. The pressure is on. And because Linux Academy is doing scenarios where you do something that utilizes EC2, it utilizes S3, maybe it utilizes one of the Amazon Edge services, or a series of Amazon AWS components working together, that gives you the perspective and insights to work with these tools. So when it comes time to actually go do the actual work that you're getting paid for, you'll feel like you've already done this before. That's an incredible value. And that's something you can get by going to linuxacademy.com/coders. They'll take 20% off your subscription. And you'll want that subscription because they're adding new stuff all the time. Great new courseware constantly over at linuxacademy.com/coders. linuxacademy.com/coders. And a really big thank you to Linux Academy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. All right, Mr. Dominic, so we got 2 emails that kind of go well together. So I'll start with the first one. It comes in from Alex, and Alex wanted to know about contract app development. He says, Chris and Mike, I've recently been approached with some contract work for mobile, but I have 0 experience as a contractor. The 2 of you have been there. Would you give me some pointers on getting started as a contractor? What do I need to know? What should I avoid? How can I cover my ass?
Yeah,
Love
let me
the
help you.
Don't. All right, here, let me read the second piece. The second, because these both can kind of go together, and then we can tackle this topic. So BMC Going wrote in onto the subreddit and said, all right, let's just assume that my company does it right, but because contractual commitments, we don't always get to do it well. How do you balance meeting dates for contractual commitments with actually taking time to make software well? I love my company, but I hate building to hard dates. We stuff items into a release schedule because we're so far underwater with deliverable items that we keep promising dates. It's absolutely the most frustrating thing in the world, and to me, we make a rubbish product out the door. I can't seem to get anyone at the company to understand we are doing ourselves a major disservice by not just eating the cost and doing things right and making it up in new sales because of it. I'm just wondering if this is something you face. Here we have a BMC on the other end of the spectrum where he's got contracts that are mandating how he works and when he works for the company he's working for. And then we've got Alex, who's going off on his own to do a few hours of mobile. Both like really complicated situations, both involve expectations, setting expectations correctly, communicating with teams and clients, and it is one of the hardest things to get right when you're working for yourself, even if it's just doing a one-off app. And I think, obviously, you could just simply dismiss all this and say, well, it's all about communication. But it's actually more nuanced than that, right, Mike?
Yeah, the problem is contracting is super weird because in a way you feel, you're very independent, but in a weird way you're less independent, right? Because, if you work at a job, what is the worst thing that can happen?
You can get fired.
Get fired. But there are plenty of laws that make sure, that you can't be abused and, stuff like that. Like you'll get another job kind of thing, right? Especially as a developer.
Well, and like here in Washington, we have free will employment, so you even are legally allowed to just get up and walk and say, I'm out, see ya, peace.
Well, same in New Jersey, and the reverse is true too, though, right? You could just say, get out.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The difference is that generally if you get fired, you get paid, right? You don't generally get stiffed unless you did something like lie in your resume, somehow defrauded the person who hired you, right?
This is egregious.
In most honest cases, you're guaranteed to get paid unless the company files bankruptcy. As a contractor, that's almost never true, right? I mean, I've been contracting for a number of years now, and even when I was just contracting alone, there are lots of sleazeball clients out there, who will at the end of the project be like, well, this is done, but this isn't quite the right shade of blue, so here's half of what we agreed for the last payment.
Right, and then all of a sudden it becomes their job to look like they've saved a bunch of money on the project, and now all of a sudden it's you versus them because they want to look good to their management.
Right, and you get into the situation where they're trying to nitpick, anything, and oh, you didn't reply to this email within, 6 hours or whatever. I guess you're trading one kind of security for another, right? I mean, financial security, you're probably better off as an employee.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on what you have found to, if you can be self-employed, what you have found to do, and if you feel like that is the type of job that you can continue to adapt to changing conditions and find new ways to make money, then you are in control of your destiny in that sense. Whereas if you work for someone, what you give up in control, you theoretically get up in sort of quote-unquote safety. But one of my hardest life lessons was when I invested 6 years into a company, and it was during the dot-com bust. And so they kept telling me over and over again, we don't pay as much as you're worth. We know that. We won't pay as much as somewhere else down south might pay you. We know that. But in 25 years, we've never laid off a single person from our company. And you have a safe job when a lot of people out there are losing their jobs. And in a few years, you'll be vested, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Well, guess what? Next year, I got laid off.
Well, so if you wanted to swap stories, a number of years ago, I was doing a contract. It was one of the very, very early iPad apps, like whenever the first iPad was, the beginning of iOS 4.
Yeah, probably.
I think it was even the beta we were working with too. And it was one of these weird hourly things, which, it was okay. It was good in a way, bad in another way. And towards the end, now I didn't know it was the end, right? All of a sudden, the client told me, you know what, Mike, let's really up these hours. I know we're contracting with you for 20 hours a week, but can we do like 40 plus and just bill it? We'll pay it. Great, right? I mean, I was thrilled. Well, guess what happened as soon as the app was delivered?
Let's see. Mike, we think we need a tweak here. Mike, what we asked for isn't exactly this. What we were kind of envisioning was...
Oh, even better. So I ended up invoicing them for, I won't give exact numbers, but a substantial amount of money, right? Because, it ended up being a lot of overtime, and they kept signing because they had their little, not QuickBooks, but one of the older time tracking systems.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, great. I mean, they're like, and they had and I should have known because they had lost the more senior contractor on the project. I didn't know why.
Oh.
So one day he just wasn't there.
Oh.
And they threw the whole thing at me, and I was thrilled, right?
Yeah, like sweet opportunity.
So I ended up invoicing them something like, it must have been like $16,000-$17,000, and I got paid a fraction of that. Because they paid another contractor over in India to review the code and say it was terrible.
Oh no!
And their position was, you will take. I think they actually ended up paying half. You'll take half, or we're going to take you. You're going to have to sue.
That is, I mean, I could just see as somebody young starting out.
Right.
Such a bad position to be in.
Well, and here's the thing:
so
I was
awful.
Stupid enough to question whether the code was good or not, so I just took the payment. I found out later, through some personal connections, that this is a common tactic, in particular that one of the investors who invests in New York with these companies does. They take young contract developers and they get other contractors just to review the code with the understanding that you will write a negative review.
Yeah, you're looking for something. It's like when you hire the security company that also sells the securing services. They come in looking for something that way they can sell you on something.
Well, it was weird because there was this whole beginning period when I was first contracting of learning, because I was like super open and super friendly with any other developer I met. And then I started to realize there's a reason people hate contractors. And it's a game I would never play. I would never go on a project and say the code was bad, even if it was.
Mm-hmm.
That bit me in the ass a few times.
Yeah.
So then I started to understand, well, hey, hang on. How come even, not even my projects, but even like other, this kind of group of contractors I was always kind of working with, I ended up asking one of the older ones, I said, how come no matter what, you say the code is bad? And he flat out told me, he said, because that means for 2 months we can bill them and they won't challenge the invoices.
Well, and the other thing too, it's exactly. That's exactly, because then the company that found the flaws is like, well, here's our price to fix them.
Right, and what are they going to do? They're either going to not pay the other contractor.
Yeah.
Or they're going to just, eat the loss. And, this is a practice I try not to do, but I have to say this is something that's it's almost like, imagine if you went to the doctor and then you went to a different doctor and he said, well, your other doctor's been poisoning you. Like,
Yeah, and if you didn't know any better as that client, like if you, like if you maybe were just thinking you were doing your due diligence and somebody came back and said, oh, yeah, this other guy's screwing you, you're going to believe them because that's what you hired them for. You're going to you're going to take their word.
it's hilarious. I mean, there was one case where I was doing a subcontracting deal for a bigger, I say company, but again, I was a one-man shop at the time. And, I wrote a review. They asked me to review this code, and I reviewed it. And they came back before they sent it to their customer and said, Mike, don't you think you could refactor the whole code base? I mean, come on. I mean, we're not saying you have to, but
Just take, maybe a quick refactor.
and I'll never forget what he said. Don't be afraid to say you need to rewrite the whole thing.
Oh, man.
The most corrupt tactic ever. But I've seen it literally especially as a contractor. Every time you see it, I mean, and I'm sure this happens with employees. Every time an employee replaces an employee, what is the best way to avoid scrutiny? Like, I see it all the time.
Jeez.
It's, I would say, this is probably and I'm writing a post about this called Empathy in Software Development. This is probably the worst trait of contracting. And you're less affected by it, like Fingertip isn't really affected by it now because we have more of a company, more of a team dynamic. But when you're a solo contractor, you kind of have to plan for the divorce because no matter who replaces you, it is always in their interest to say what you did was wrong. And if you replace someone else and you don't do that, well, you've now inherited all of their problems and agreed that you can still do it on the budget you originally set.
Right.
So it's one of those, I don't know.
I would say to Alex, because Alex is our emailer who's just starting. My take on this would be, don't worry about coming across as. I think sometimes people don't do all the contracts and don't establish a few boundaries up front because they're worried about killing the deal by making it too official, too businessy, killing the momentum. But in reality, if a business has their crap together, they will respect that you have your crap together. And so it actually just builds more of a mutual trust. It's not going to kill the relationship. So, Alex, have a contract in place that you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, especially for something simple. And like Mike said, also remember you're planning for the divorce. You want to consider what life is going to be after you're done with the project and things like that, and how that's going to work.
You never want to take a payment structure that's super backloaded, right?
Exactly.
Because that opens basically the closer to delivery the payments are, the more risk you are taking. So if that's something that the customer needs, well, they should pay more, right? It's like insurance. They should pay more for you absorbing the risk.
Mm-hmm. Now, our BMC, he's the guy that's stuck in a situation where the company he's working for gets in these contracts and they overpromise, and then they have to cut corners and they don't deliver a very good product because somebody else at another layer is setting these timetables, and he can't get people to change it. Mike, this one I'm not so optimistic about.
What do you mean?
Well, so he says, I love my company, but I hate that we keep on building hard dates.
Right,
but this
right.
isn't something he has control over. See this, and he's tried to do a culture change, but he says, I can't seem to get anyone at the company to understand that we're doing ourselves a major disservice.
So the problem is people who need to change probably aren't your company. It's probably their customers, right? When you deal with folks, especially in more of the accounting, more of the business side of the world, they have this concept of commitments, and commitments always have a date, right? If you were to do the UML, a commitment always has an absolute date.
Right, you're gonna build this building. Give us the end date of the construction project.
Right, and for them, a missed commitment is literally the worst thing in the world. But they also feel like, you can't just say 4 months, right? Because that's too vague. I could definitely see how you might want to go with a more agile approach.
What about a tool set that the clients? I mean, Is it crazy to just open the books up and be like, all right, well, here's our progress tracker, here's our bug tracker, here's our our Gantt chart, whatever. Is that crazy too? Oh, geez, we've lost. Oh, good. Is it crazy to open the books up and let the client see what the timetable is and let clients see the bug statuses and just give them all of the data, and that way when you sit down, you both are having a conversation from the same point and not like one's trying to sound like they're really on top of everything and one has to play the really hard-lined budget role. Like, you could just eliminate those personas just by saying, okay, here we're all working from the same data.
Yeah, I've tried that. That doesn't work.
Okay.
So here's what happens, right? They play the hard budget role, and you have no ace of trump to play. You have nothing up your sleeve because everything's open.
So get you.
Well, but this depends on who your customer is, right? I mean, there's those scummy customers that are going to rob you. Ultimately, you have to figure out what is the goal. Do you want to be delivering, if you're unhappy at your company, because you're probably, unless your company is like a 10-man company, one man's not going to initiate any change, right?
Right.
So you could walk, but you have to understand that it sounds like you're in the development services industry. The customers are usually not tech people. They don't get that things take time. And frankly, not a lot of them have a tremendous amount of respect for tech people anyway. I've heard everything from, we'll just go buy more Mountain Dew and Fritos, right? So you're never going to get away from what I call calendar-driven development. So at some point, you either have to embrace it, which is what I'm currently trying, or, just be unhappy, right?
Yeah, I have the situation where Coda Radio goes live at noon, right? And the Linux Action Show goes live at 10 a.m. And there are some weeks where the show is just not where I wanted to have. I'm specifically thinking of like maybe I'm going to do a demo on LAS of something. And this week actually went pretty well. But this week could be an example of like, I do a demo, and I'm only able to do about 70% of what I actually want to do. Now, people watching don't even know, but I know internally that I didn't hit my target of what I wanted to fully be able to demonstrate. And then when, so what I have to do when 10 a.m., well, really, it's the night before,
right.
I say, all right, well, this is what I'm cutting, this is what I'm focusing on, and then I quote-unquote ship that. And there's times where, it's the definition of deadline-driven production. It is, by its very nature, everything is deadline-driven. And there is a way to embrace that in such that it actually creates a rhythm and a routine that supports the development, the creation, but it can also be something that you fight the entire time. And like Mike says, if you fight that, if you go up against that constantly, you're not going to have a good time. That is going to be unhappy. Because it is, I think, unfortunately, the nature of the business beast. And you can see why from their standpoint. They need something tangible like that to plan around, to budget around. Like, they need dates. That's just an impedance mismatch between the creation of software and the requirements of business. Yeah. There you go. Mike, is there anything else we want to touch on?
Yeah, we need more Condoleezza Rice on the show.
You think so, huh? Because I do have. We always have Barry. We could.
I will. Hold on, guys. Come on. There's just.
We always got that.
Whoa, Barry! What's the matter with Barry?
It was his birthday, and they were asking tough questions about travesties going around the world. It would be this is a good opportunity to say, hey, if you have any thoughts, any experience, any questions about TypeScript, send them into the show. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click on the contact link, choose Coda Radio from the drop-down, send in your thoughts. You can also go to codaradio.reddit.com to leave your comments there, or just email us directly, codaradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com. That was impressive. I did that with my lips.
That was disturbing as hell.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dominic. Is there anything else we want to cover on this week's episode of the Coda Radio Show?
No, I would just say anyone looking for some calendar-based development, contact Fingertip Tech.
There you go. If you got a calendar and you want to pin a date on there for an app, give Mike a call. Of course, you could also follow Mike on Twitter. He is at Dumanuku, right?
That's right.
Dumanuku? Duminoku?
Something Dominuco, I think.
Something like that. I'm Chris LAS, and people always think that's the airport. Like, why do you have the LA or Vegas? I can't remember. Why do you have what you like? Are you like a air travel buff? I'm like, no, it's Linux. Twitter is old. I'm old. Get off my case, people. Hey, look, we'd love to have you join us live. Go over jblive.tv Mondays, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Join us live. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of Coda Radio. We'll see you right back here next week.